Hi everyone. As you can see, we took all the seats out, so now we're ready to take the floor out to make sure that there's no rust underneath, and also to treat it for when we put the wooden floor on top of it. So we got a tip on how to do this in an easier way.
So the tip was, if a screw is really being hard coming out, give it a few knocks with the hammer, and then it should come out a little easier. So we're gonna test that tip and see if that actually works.
We're gonna divide and conquer. Cora is gonna be in charge of the hammer, and I'm gonna be in charge of the drill. Let's do it. What happens sometimes is that the screws just spin if you don't tap it with the hammer. And that's why you have to tap it with the hammer. So we're gonna try one that we haven't touched to see if we tap it, if it comes out. I'm gonna the truth. There you go. So the tip works. So we're gonna have to tap every single one of this. All right, Cora, let's get to work. So Cora went first, hitting every screw with the hammer. Then I followed up using the drill, bringing up every screw. If we would have had an impact drive, we wouldn't have to hit each screw first.
This part of the task is tedious, but not too demanding. The screws go into the plywood, but not through the metal bottom of the bus.
Once the screws came up, the metal siding around the track came up pretty easy. We used a small pry bar to pull it up.
Sometimes a screw would spin even though we whacked it with the hammer. In those cases, we used the pry bar to pull the screw up. Because the screws are going only into the plywood, this wasn't too difficult.
The tracking lining is in pretty good shape, so we'll be able to reuse it or sell it for scrap. The next step was removing the rubber. This is a tedious task and it takes a while because the rubber is pretty difficult to pull up in some areas. The tracking breaks up the floor into sections, so you have to go section by section with a pry bar to pull up all the rubber. So I started taking the rubber and the floor out, and I was using this little pry bar. It was really hard and it was taking a long time to get the job done. So hopefully with this bigger pry bar, it will make my job easier and faster. So let's go and find out. Using the longer pry bar definitely made a big difference. You might wonder, why am I spending time pulling up the rubber if I'm going to remove the plywood anyway? Well, that's because the rubber is not cut into sections like the underlying plywood. If I started removing the plywood right now, I'll be dealing with having the rubber holding each cut section of plywood to one another. The next step in the conversion is to remove this plywood. And for that, I'm going to use this pry bar. All right, let's get to work. After removing a few pieces of plywood, I wanted to stop and show you guys the reason why it's very important to remove the old floor from these buses before you start doing your conversion. As you can see in our bus, there's a lot of rust. It's surface rust, so there's nothing to worry about. But it needs to be clean and the floor needs to be treated before we install the new floor. Again, the tracking makes it so that the floor is separated into sections with the plywood cut around the tracking. So you have to go section by section pulling up the plywood. The plywood is secured to the metal bottom of the bus by nails, not screws. Most of those nails stay in the metal floor of the bus as the plywood was ripped up.
After removing the plywood from the floor, there's a lot of nails remaining. We're holding the plywood together to the floor, so they have to be removed. I'm gonna use this pry bar, this end of the pry bar, to remove those nails. Alright, so we got a situation right here. We have a few screws that don't want to come out. They're being stubborn. So for that, I'm going to have to use this power tool to remove them quickly. See, that was pretty quick. Let's get the rest of them.
Now the tracking lining, rubber, plywood, and nails are removed. The next step is to remove the tracking that is bolted through the bottom of the floor of the bus. To see how we did that, check out our series of bus conversion videos. We are documenting every step of our bus conversion, including the mistakes and lessons that we learned. So if you found this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe to the Aren't We There Yet channel.